So here, let me get you an intro. We'll get cranking here as we start the week. Hey, today we have a highly motivated guest with us, Rex and Serrao, or Rex, who brings the rare combination of military service and cutting-edge tech leadership. He's a quartermaster officer in the Army National Guard and currently serves as head of developer experience products at Apple, leading innovation at the highest levels of the tech world. Before Apple, he was a senior director at Salesforce, where he helped launch groundbreaking AI and digital platforms like Salesforce Plus, impacting millions of users worldwide. With over 15 years' experience in product leadership, strategy, and innovation, he's built, scaled, and led teams across major industries while serving in uniform. Today, he's here to share how veterans can adapt to the civilian workforce, break into tech, and leverage their military experience for success. Welcome, Rex. Did I manage to get it all? Because you got a lot going on.
You're very kind. Thank you. It sounds nice when you say it that way.
Other than maybe perhaps you're a workaholic.
A little bit, a little bit.
Well, hey, usually I see those folks do pretty well. So good on you, man. So I'll just get started off with the elephant in the room. So I mean, you had a long corporate career before joining the army. What motivated you to serve later in life?
I think so. I'm an immigrant. I was born and raised in Kuwait to Indian parents, and so the journey to become a citizen is pretty long. It took me about I'd say about 17 years before I became a citizen. And I think once you become a citizen, you start to ask a very different set of questions, right? Up until you become a citizen, you're really focused on, you know, um, house, home, security, etc. But I think once you become a citizen, you have the opportunity to ask questions like, what does it mean to become a citizen of the country? How do I connect to the country in a way beyond that of a financial immigrant, right? And as I was exploring some of those opportunities, I think the National Guard came up. I didn't even really know what the National Guard was, and as I looked into that, it just seemed like a way for me to build a connection in a much deeper way. I've had a very fortunate life, and so this felt like a way that I could maybe give back in a way that was
Oh,
fun
thanks.
to
Yeah, somebody's
I
got a hot
saw it.
mic. Hey, somebody's got a hot mic. Whoever just said what's up. Sorry about that, Rex. Everybody coming in Monday morning sometimes forgets to hit the button. It's what you just said. I recruited for many years, and I cannot tell you how many people basically said the exact same thing to me. I had one guy from Venezuela come in at 39 years old.
Oh wow.
I got him in 2 months before he turned 40. And yeah, it was close, but I'll tell you what, he killed it at basic training as a 40-year-old and smoked the kids on the PT stuff. So I was like, dude, you're going to be great. So, I mean, how did your corporate experience shape how you approach the service, though? It's obviously a very different animal.
Yeah. I think I was like your recruit. I was older when I got in, so I was about 35 or 36 or so when I got in and went to basic. I think the big difference is you have the opportunity to kind of zoom back, right? Zoom out a little. You have the opportunity to kind of say, oh, there's a life beyond basic that I know I can get back to. There's friends and there's family and there's relationships in somewhat of a different way. You also have the opportunity to kind of just really appreciate what it is and what it means for the majority of the armed forces to have 17 and 18-year-olds going to basic. You don't really appreciate that fact and what it means and what a 17 or 18-year-old really, I mean, you kind of forget, right? You kind of become 20, 30, and you kind of forget what that's like. So for me, I think it really just helped me appreciate what it meant for young men and women to go into service. It made the process a little easier for me just because they were discovering a lot of the soft skills that you just end up building through a corporate career. So it was really illuminating, I would say.
That's pretty cool. I mean, so what lessons do you think you took from military, or I mean, what lessons from military service changed how you view corporate leadership now?
I think the biggest set of changes probably came when I was in officer candidate school. So the big lesson is, never compromise standards, right? That idea of simply not having an excuse, mission first, never compromising standards. I was able to kind of bring that intensity. My wife would tell you I was always an intense person, but I think coming through basic training, officer candidate school, and getting to my unit, I was able to kind of channel some of that intensity and deep mission focus back into my team. I think I personally saw a marked and measurable improvement in just goal attainment in any team or organization that I led since joining the Army, just because of that, again, that intense focus on no excuses, get the mission done, and then never compromise standards. So if that means you got to work a little extra, you work a little extra. If that means you got to, work one-on-one with someone to coach them up to get better, then that's what you do. Intelligently, if you bring some of those lessons from the armed forces into corporate America, there's those synergistic 1+1 = 3 moments kind of really all over the place.
Well, I mean, especially for a company like Apple, I mean, I don't think, military service member in Apple at all. It does not compute because it's such a different kind of a dichotomy between, the two thought processes. I mean, are there similarities you see there where like you'd say, oh, well, already you'd probably be surprised.
I would say, let me answer the question about similarity by highlighting a really important difference. I think in the armed forces, one of the things you get that you will almost never get in corporate America is this idea of brotherhood or sisterhood. I know that might seem a little high-minded or idealistic, but for the most part, that concept of deep brotherhood, sisterhood, your trauma bonding, right, for months on end, years on, it just doesn't really exist very commonly in corporate America. Some job roles may have it, but it's not a common thing. It's important then when you think about transition to corporate America to not necessarily look for something that you will never find, right? You're probably better off finding that camaraderie and in other parts of your life, friends, family, veterans networks, etc. Where the similarities come in though, is primarily around senior leadership at organizations are very clear about what they want, the mission that they want, the goal, that the hill that they want to take. In corporate America, by default, because you don't have that deep mission focus, it's not really beat into a lot of folks who've only seen corporate America. That intensity and desire to achieve something kind of dissipates, or has the likelihood of dissipation, as you go down the various layers. I think one of the things that you could bring in as someone who has been in the armed forces is this deep intensity and focus on the mission, right? Now, intensity does not necessarily mean aggression. And I think that's one of the changes you'd have to make, right? Is not be aggressive, but you can be very, very intense. But I think that mission focus, that focus on the KPI, the key performance indicators that your unit, your team, your organization is focused on, it's probably the single most effective thing that you could do, right? If all of you on the call have written really great NCOERs or OERs, you know that you have to use a lot of quantitative numbers, right? Like X million dollars of equipment, 500 soldiers, so on and so forth. That idea of distilling what you've done into a set of very measurable numbers is highly, highly valued and deeply prized in a corporate setting.
Yeah, we love our numbers. So, hey, I mean, looking back at it, you kind of hinted at it a little bit, but I mean, how did combining both of those experience, corporate and military, make you more effective?
I think I'll answer it maybe philosophically first, and then be specific. I think philosophically, one of the things I did not realize. So I'm based out of California, so in the Bay Area. It's on the face of it a very diverse place, right? Diverse as in like demographic diversity. You got people from all over the world, different ethnicities, so on and so forth. What I never realized was, while there's a lot of demographic differences, from a thought perspective, we're all pretty much the same. Like you could pick anyone in the Bay Area and go like, what do you think about this, situation? And we probably all sound the same for the most part. One of the things that I learned from the Army was this wide variety of lived experiences. This, the different perspective someone has growing up in a different socioeconomic situation is so important, because it helps you see problems in a very different way. And so that ability to kind of step back and realize that you're not a hero of your own story, like there's many other stories going on around you, are really, really important, because you start to be able to build these coalitions. And in large corporations, it's very hard to kind of go it alone. if you want to go far, you really have to go together. And in the army, you have, this concept of like mandatory fun or mandatory teaming. Again, those concepts don't really exist in corporate America. You have to convince people, you have to build coalitions. And so the ability to kind of realize that there's just so many different people with so many different perspectives, and you're going to have to adapt to and speak to them, or it just becomes really valuable as you try to make change in an organization. Practically, what I tell you is, or rather tactically, what I tell you is really helpful is, in the Army, we love our SOPs, we love our tracking, we love our reports, so on and so forth. It will surprise you that that is not a natural muscle in large organizations, particularly on the tech side. And so if you can bring that structure while still leaving a lot of space to be innovative and deal with ambiguity and the like, it's a very potent combination. You will make a lot of difference really quickly.
I can see that. So, I mean, what's the hardest part you have between integrating, being on drill weekend or going to OCS and then reintegrating back into the civilian workforce? I mean, that's a heck of a switch to flip.
Yeah. That's an interesting question. I think the hardest thing is, making space for yourself so that you don't bring debt from one side of your life to another side of your life, right? If I had a bad drill, right, we just got smoked, or the whole unit had to kind of, hands across America, look for someone's, NVGs or whatever. You can't go to work on Monday and then bring that negativity, right? You have to find a way to kind of reset and show up to work as, Rex, the civilian. And then when you show up to drill, if you had a bad week at work, especially if you're in a leadership position as an NCO or an officer, you can't show up with kind of negativity or a negative attitude, right? You gotta zero in, you gotta center yourself and show up ready to give it 100%. And that mental switch, if you don't have a process for that, ends up taking a toll on both your teams, right? Your civilian work team and your spouses and your family, your kids start to kind of feel this weariness if you don't have a way to manage it. And then your military, family also starts to see that. So that whatever that means for you individually, you have to find that process that works for you, so you can really enter that different space 100%.
It's funny, we have some speakers in here and they've said it, and you said it in a different way, which I very much appreciate. But basically is like, once you take the uniform off, you got to forget the rank, you got to forget you wore it, you take those experiences, but you leave the anger behind, or the sense of self-responsibility, some of those things that are beaten into our heads, sometimes quite literally. And you got to turn it off. And sometimes that's pretty hard. But it's something all of us have to do at some point. And for some, it's a little bit more difficult than others.
Yeah, you have to, I can't stress enough, like there are things that you do in the armed forces that you have to explicitly not do in corporate America, right? There's absolutely no yelling, right? You've immediately failed if you've yelled in a corporate setting. You have to tone down the language, right? That just, it is what it is. You can get mad at it. You can be annoyed at it. You can complain to your buddies over a beer, right? All good. But being mad at the situation doesn't change the situation. It's really important to think about it as you're operating in different theaters. The theater of being in the armed forces, whether you're deployed, activated, guard, reserves, whatever, is different than being in the theater of a corporate setting. And you wouldn't get mad if you had to, change into, cold winter uniform if you were up in Alaska, right? You would just do the thing that you needed to do, be successful in that theater. It's the same thing. Stop focusing on what you can't control and focus on what you can control. Typically, that means yourself.
Yeah, makes sense. So how do you kind of reframe your Army skills so that, the people working for you and the people you work for kind of understand what you're doing? Because for most of those people, especially, I assume a place like that, it's Greek written in Cyrillic. It makes no sense to them on the surface.
So what I found works really well is to tell them what I'm drawing on from my experience, right? So usually when I start with a new team, I usually say, hey, I'm generally a very structured person. I can be very literal when it comes to goal attainment. I am extremely, I'll say particular. I'm very particular about, making commitments and keeping commitments. And I like things written down in an SOP, right? I'll say that. And that comes from my experience, in the armed forces. So if something about that bothers you or is challenging to you, like, let me know and we can talk about it. Like, we can talk about, like, or is my, we can talk about if that works for you or if that doesn't work for you and what we can do about it. But typically, I think if you address that head on, it actually works out better than if you just show up and you're somehow just out of sync with general corporate America. If they know where you're coming from and why you show up a certain way, I found that there's a lot more leeway and, in fact, a lot more of a welcoming attitude to some of the changes that you can bring. And also realize there's some jerks at work, right? You can show up great and they're just jerks, and that's okay. But yeah, I'd say those are the main things that one does.
Yeah, I mean, if you work in a big company and there's no jerks at work, you're probably still asleep and dreaming.
Exactly.
There's just no way around that. So, I mean, what kind of misconceptions did you notice in corporate America about veterans, and how do you address them to say, "Oh, hey, that's not quite how it is"?
Yeah. So I think there's two that I think jump out. So one of them is, your level of aggression and intensity and how people interpret that. And two, there might be an assumption of, political beliefs, so on and so forth. And so I think with the political beliefs, what I'll advise all of you is keep them to yourself. Do not bring political beliefs into corporate America. There is absolutely no good that can come from that. For every one ally you find, for whatever your beliefs may be, you will find 5 people that don't like it, and it will come up in some way to hurt you or haunt you in the future. Leave the politics outside of work. Again, like I said, like, talk about it with your buddies over beer or whatever, all good. The other thing is intensity and aggression. There is you will face the assumption that you are highly intense, highly aggressive, very motivated, so on and so forth. I've used a couple of different synonyms there, but the main takeaway is there is an assumption that you will show up really hot about pretty much every topic. You have an opportunity to kind of, again, just reset those words and what they mean. Right. So, like, define what aggressive means, define what intense means, define what passionate means, and have that conversation very openly. One of my old managing directors told me early on in my career, sunlight is the best disinfectant, right? You want to draw out some of that, some of those perceptions so you can deal with them in a professional, calm manner, and admit if you're an intense person, like, admit that you're an intense person. Like, hey, I'm really intense. I love this job. I love what I'm doing. I want to show up really, really great about it. And just deal with it head on. I'd say those are the 2 major misconceptions I've faced so far.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right to warn about the politics. I mean, we've seen hundreds of people getting terminated in the last week, and it's one of those ones where it's like, hey, each person believes their side's 100% correct, but if you go out there too vociferously, one side or the other is not going to like that. So sometimes just to keep your head down, just do your job.
Yeah. Again, and there's a place for politics. It's called your friends and family, right? Like, go talk to them about that. Leave it out of the workplace, even if you think that even if you think you have a like-minded individual. What ends up happening is you start to let your guard down, and again, it's one of the differences, like I mentioned at the top of the call, around corporate America and armed forces. In the armed forces, there's this notion of, hey, an NCO will kind of leave a squad for a certain amount of time to do a certain amount of things, and we're just not going to get involved. Or an officer might hear something, but we'll just look the other way if it's within a certain kind of set of rails. In corporate America, it's a very risk-averse environment. It's a very risk-averse environment. And that's neither good nor bad. It simply is what it is. And so what that means is, they really want to manage potential for misinterpretation. And so you don't want to waste any of your own cycles or the firm's cycles dealing with potential misunderstandings. So just keep the politics outside of work, focus on kind of what you love to do as a job, and I think you'll have a much better and more successful career.
Yeah, at work, every rail is the third rail.
It can be, absolutely.
Yeah. So how do you think your experience in the Army gives you a competitive edge compared to your peers who have only been corporate?
I think two things. Like, I hate to repeat myself, but it's mission focus and intensity. I think about how clear sometimes the armed forces can be about what this mission is, what success looks like, right? The commander's intent, you hear it said all the time. That commander's intent, and the laser focus of everybody underneath to just make sure that the intent is realized. Again, like I said, that intensity, that passion can dissipate in a large organization. The distance between, the CEO and, the newest entry-level employee is quite large. It's just a lot of layers. And so passion can dissipate. I think as someone from the armed forces, you can reinvigorate your team. You can set your team to be the exemplar for other teams in that organization by kind of keeping that passion, that intensity alive. The other thing is structure. Don't let anyone tell you that structure is the enemy of innovation. I think structure allows people to innovate in the right way. You can innovate faster, you can innovate in the right direction, so on and so forth. So bring that structure, right? I cannot tell you, some of the best things I've done is simply define terms, create plans, write SOPs. These things that seem very boring in the Army, you're like, I've seen so many regs, I can't believe I got to write regs. They are a huge difference maker in corporate America, mainly because a lot of people aren't familiar with them. They aren't familiar how to write them. They don't want to write them. They haven't lived with them. They find them constraining. And so you can arbitrage the skills and the experience of working within really tight structure in corporate America. Again, don't use it to choke out innovation, but done well, you can use that structure to drive innovation, better results, better KPIs, measurable benefit to the enterprise. So I'd say those two things, really become your superpowers.
So you've been in this position, but on the reverse side. So what advice would you give veterans who feel behind in their career compared to their civilian counterparts? Because you're behind in your military career because you did the civilian world. So now you're on the opposite side of a lot of people here. So what are your thoughts there?
I'll share, I'll bucket my thoughts or bracket them in kind of two areas. So one of them is, remember to run your own race, right? You don't need to compare yourself to someone who started off in corporate America at 22, 23, and that's all they did, and those are all the experiences they have. Don't make that comparison, because what's that phrase? That comparison is a thief of joy. Like, you simply will not catch up to them in a really direct race, and it's almost irrelevant. Your race is about you, right? When you want to retire, like, what's your financial number that you want to hit so that you can retire? When do you want to stop working? What does fun look like for you? What's a healthy life for you? So one thing is, run your own race. Don't benchmark your career against the careers of people who've just taken a wildly different path. They haven't had the rest of the experiences that you've had. And so I'd say are less rich in another way because of it. But more tactically, I think as you're looking to transition, I would say, broadly speaking, Michael's comment in chat is excellent. Compare yourself to where you were yesterday, right? Like, I think that's super, super important. Run your own race. I think more tactically, as you transition, there's two types of transitioning that I'll talk about. One of them is if you're transitioning from a career from an armed forces career that has a direct civilian counterpart. How do you make that transition? And then there's one, which is if you are in a field that just doesn't exist on the civilian side. Candidly, I'll have more advice for the former, but I'll do my best to kind of share stuff about the latter. In the former, if you are in, if you're in Signal Corps, you're in Quartermaster, you're in logistics, so on and so forth, some of these things that have very direct civilian counterparts, a couple of things you can do. Make sure that as you write your resumes, that you're writing resumes that are civilian in nature, right? I can tell you on the civilian side, no one has any idea what a division is, a battalion is, a company is, a platoon is, so just don't use those words, right? Simply by saying team, organization, so on and so forth, automatically your resume becomes more approachable. Now, highlight a lot of the numerical things that I talked about. So if you work with X million dollars worth of, IT equipment, call that out. If you managed maintenance for XYZ million dollars of Humvees or, MTVs or what so have you, call that out. If you managed, a company's worth of, if you're a first sergeant, like talk about how many soldiers were under your direction. So you wanna try and use civilian analogs as much as possible. That doesn't do any dishonor to your military service. You're just, again, you're operating in the theater that you wanna be in. The other thing I tell you is invest in education, and this goes to both sides of the house, right? Whether you have a civilian counterpart in your career or you don't. I myself, when I joined Salesforce, I knew nothing about Salesforce. I studied in my own time. I got 9 certifications in Salesforce. When I joined Apple, I knew nothing about the Clara software. I got 6 certifications there. When I was running a project management office, never done it before, I got PMP certified. Prior to that, when I switched from electrical engineering to software development, I got Scrum certified and product owner certified. I'm telling you this mainly because learning is something that you've always done in your military career. Bring that learning habit, that intensity into the civilian workplace. So if you are trying to go sideways into a civilian, a career with a civilian counterpart, make sure you have the certifications. And there's so many programs in, with the DoD, right, that will pay for it. So take advantage of those things. There's a certification doesn't automatically communicate that you know something, but it may give you a leg up compared to someone who doesn't. So you want to take every advantage you can. If you are moving from a career that has no civilian counterpart, what I would tell you is, in this job market, networking is super, super important. You really want to get referrals from people who are in a company, who know the hiring manager, so on and so forth. So definitely lean on networks wherever you can. The other thing I would tell you is, if you are in armor or infantry and so on and so forth, and you're applying to an HR position, while I cannot give you direct advice, I would ask you to think about it from the hiring manager's perspective. Focus less on the fact that you were, firing javelins, right? But focus more on the fact, or focus less on that fact, focus more on the fact that you, if you're an NCO, you were writing and reviewing NCOERs. Focus on the fact that you were providing quarterly and yearly counselings to your soldiers. So try and find the requisite skill sets or the target skill sets, and then frame your experience in that way. If you simply narrate what you did in your job, as hiring managers get hundreds of resumes. They'll simply look at it and go like, oh, I don't need an infantryman or someone in the armor branch, so I'm just going to move on to the next resume. But if you focus in on, hey, I really focus on these HR competencies, if that's the type of job you want to pivot into, then they'll at least stop, pause, and take a look. So I'd summarize my feedback in those 2 categories.
That's great, man. You mentioned the networking. So how about mentorship, both giving and receiving, how did that work for you in your reverse transition?
What I'd say is mentorship is an easy way for you to feel connected and get really good advice. Now, I'll be honest with you, not all mentors kind of match, and so you need to kind of like chit chat with a bunch of mentors, see who's kind of on your same wavelength. But take advantage of those mentoring opportunities for 2 reasons. One, they will widen your perspective, right? If you're facing a series of challenges over and over again, you're hitting a wall and you don't know how to break through, that's where mentorship really shines. Less as a venting session, more so as how do I get over this hill that I just don't seem to have the experience or skills to kind of get over. That's where mentors can really shine. If you want to be a mentor, it's a huge way to share the knowledge, the experience that you have with, other enlisted or even junior officers, right? Like it's a huge, I think about how much I learned from the NCOs that I work with. It's incredible. And so I think one of the things in corporate America that's really hard is that mentoring, that muscle isn't automatic. Even though there might be some formal programs, there's something about it that just, even in my short time in the armed forces, hasn't felt as authentic or genuine as some of the relationships I've created in in the armed forces. So what I would say is that being a mentor allows you to feel really good about transitioning some of that experience and kind of building up the next generation. But being mentored, but at any level, I have a mentor today, it just helps you break through some things that you can't break through yourself, and can just give you a different perspective, right? And there's no rule to say that you can only have one of each. You can have multiple mentors for different reasons, different things, different skills, and you can mentor different people who might need different things from you. So it's a highly enriching experience on both sides of the equation.
Yeah, it is. Believe me, it is. Hey, Jason, go ahead.
Hey Rex, thanks for the mention about the leadership piece. I think that's probably something that was missing out of my resume. I think I'll go back and add that portion in for the counseling and management of teams. But I got to ask you a question, because you said something about the certifications. 20 years in the Marine Corps, right? I have had opportunities to have certifications. I've done them in the past. A lot of them have expired because I've moved on to new roles and didn't keep up with CPEs and stuff. As I'm looking at positions external of government work, right? I know the requirements in the 8410, the 8570 series for certifications are going to hold me to it, DAU, stuff like that. But when I'm looking at the civilian sector, some of the jobs actually have them listed, but how, in your experience, or at least from your perspective, how dedicated should we be about trying to work at those certifications prior to putting in the applications, or just go ahead and go for it and tell them, look, I've got a history, I've done these type of certifications, I can get them. What's your thought on that?
I would always, so there's a couple of things in there. And so what I'd say is, if you had them in the past, you're better off having them on your resume and just putting a little like E next to it, right? Because keep in mind, when recruiters or hiring managers are scanning resumes, they're actually basically using a fancy version of Control F and looking for a keyword. So if they're looking for a cert, they just want to see that it's on the resume. The fact that it's an E, expired or whatnot, like, you can always kind of work around that. The other thing you mentioned is, if you don't have the experience versus having the experience. There are some certifications that require you to have experience. One example is the project management professional, right? The PMP. That certification requires you to have a certain number of years to get the certification. But there's other certifications like Certified Scrum Master, Product Owner, CCNA, so on and so forth, that don't need experience. And so if you feel like you have even related experience, you're better off attempting to go get it. The worst thing that'll happen is you'll apply, you'll pass the test, and I'll say, hey, go get another year of experience. That's the worst thing that's going to happen, right? The best thing is you can still put it on your resume to say, hey, I passed the PMP, or I passed a particular examination. Remember, these certifications exist on your resume to give you that edge, right? So they really exist as a keyword for recruiters to find you, less so as a promissory note that you're really, really great at this skill. And I promise you, I'm sure you met some of these people as well. A certification does not guarantee that someone knows what they're talking about or has the experience. It just is your key to get in the door, right? Just one more advantage you're stacking in your favor.
Thanks, Rex. That was helpful.
Yeah, no worries.
So kind of build on that. What mistakes do you see vets make the most in their job hunt or during their interviews? I'm sure you've kind of seen a few of those or discussed it.
Yeah. Again, I've limited experience. I don't want to come across as an expert here, but the two that kind of jump out at me, one, particularly veterans that have been highly successful, whether they've done the 20 or they've just done kind of some subset of the 20 years. The more successful they are in their Army career, oftentimes the less willing they might be to reframe their experience into the civilian sector, right? If you're like you're a first sergeant, you're a master sergeant, and you were doing amazing work at your unit, there's this hesitation to say, yeah, but I don't want to boil it down to, just a series of like very boring sounding civilian competencies. And what I would say to them is, and I say that some of you struggle with that, just realize you're operating in a different theater. It doesn't matter what words you put on your resume. Civilians just don't understand what those words mean. They simply don't. Like even those who are supportive of the armed forces, they look at these words and they go like, I don't know what, UX 75 is. I have no idea what, like, some of them don't even know how many is, or like, MTV. So you really have to reframe it as a civilian resume. And so you could, the test I've advised people to use is, if I were to just hide US Army on your resume, does the rest of that job make sense to a civilian hiring manager, right? And I'm not saying hide your military experience. What I'm saying is reframe it towards the job that you want to get. So that's one change that one thing that I've seen veterans struggle with when they, particularly successful ones. The other area I've seen is not necessarily having a clear vision for what type of job they want to go. And I'm reminded of, a diagram, again, the same MD kind of showed me a long time ago. He drew a circle and then he drew arrows, in every direction coming out of the circle. He says you could operate in that manner, or he drew another circle and he drew one arrow going all the way up. If you put all your energy in one or maybe two directions, you're far more likely to succeed. So if you say, hey, I want any job anywhere in any field, it's very hard for you to invest in learning. It's very hard for you to invest in building a network. It's really hard for you to really understand the industry and become an expert in the industry, right? And so understand the type of job family you really want to target. Understand the firms you're going after. You don't want to just shotgun resumes onto the internet. Like, what are the top 25 to 50 firms you really are focused on attacking? How are you building your network in those firms? Are you doing cold outreach, so on and so forth? So it's very key that you have a focus. And once you have a focus, things really change, right? So when I was looking for my next role right before Apple, I can't tell you, everywhere I applied, I would then go to LinkedIn. I would, click on the company's page. I would look at the jobs, find all the HR people at the firm, be like, hey, I have experience in blah, blah, blah. If somebody mentioned armed forces, I would bring it up and be like, hey, I'm applying for this job. I have some experience in the armed forces. I think it kind of gives me an edge. And so I could only invest that time in doing that type of targeted outreach because I knew the type of firms I wanted to target. I knew the type of jobs I wanted, and I would really focus my energy there. So I would say those are the two dominant challenges I've seen veterans struggle with. One is really making their resume understandable and appealing to civilians. And then two, not really having a tight enough goal or target about what type of job they want as they transition into the civilian world.
Got it. Michael, go ahead.
Hey, thank you, Rick, for taking the time today to be with us. But one of the questions I have with what you do with Apple, of course, with development at what some would say the conglomerate that Apple is.
Yep.
Obviously, you guys work with a lot of smaller companies too. What would you say, like because with the whole idea of I've got to get into FANG, as a developer, well, maybe not. Like, what would you say that the difference is between like going straight for a development role at Apple compared to, like, say, the same role at one of the smaller companies that fall under the Apple umbrella?
That's such a great question. I don't want to get on a soapbox, but so you'll have to keep me honest if I start getting ranty or venti. FANG becomes everybody's focus, and there's so many challenges with jobs at FANGs. One is it is probably the most competitive set of jobs that people are going after, right? To get a job at Google, as an example, is more competitive than getting accepted into Harvard, okay? So to pour energy into just FANG, if you're not like perfectly using, like a veteran job program that some of these companies may have, or you just don't have the perfect resume, right? Can be challenging, right? Can be challenging, can be frustrating because you're dealing with so much more rejection. And I'll tell you just personally, I learned more not working for FANG than I did working for FANG, right? Because with FANG, one of the nice things is you get a lot of specialty roles around you are filled really well. When you're not working for a FANG, all of a sudden you have to be, you just have to wear many hats. You get to see one or two processes upstream and downstream, right? So if you're, use software development as an example, if you're a software developer in a smaller firm, you have to do your own tooling. You might have to write your own tests. You might have to do your own QA. You might have to manage your own CI/CD pipeline, right? Whereas in larger firms, all of that is taken care of for you. So if you've never worked at a smaller firm, you run the risk of actually not understanding fully how those other parts work. Smaller firms also are much less competitive for jobs. They often, in my experience, I've seen have a larger appreciation for veterans, just because it's a smaller firm, so you're dealing with people on a more human basis. Larger firms is really by the book, by policy, and they just kind of have to churn through applicants with a very different focus. So I'm not trying to dissuade people from going into FANG firms. They're great firms. You'll meet incredibly smart people doing incredibly smart things. I truly feel like the dumbest guy in my organization right now, and that's awesome, right? It means I'm learning. But
I was gonna say that's where we all want to be, right?
That's where you all want to be. You want to be the dumbest guy in the room, right? And keep working to learn. But please apply for those mid-tier firms, those smaller firms. There's so much opportunity there. They struggle to find talent. And that's, again, a great arbitrage point for you, right? Is you're struggling to find talent. I bring a lot of talent. I'm willing to do a little extra. I'm willing to bring that intensity. I'm willing to bring some of that learning, the large company learning into, as from the armed forces into your mid-sized small firm. There's so much opportunity. I would say FANG is great. Also, don't sleep on kind of mid-sized and small business. There's a lot of opportunity.
So with the number of IT folks that are on the call, of course, it's really easy to go onto LinkedIn and search for cyber. And again, a lot of the bigger companies, because paying for ads and for space, are the ones that are popping up. Where are some good places for some of our IT folks in varied areas of IT to find some of these like small to medium firms?
So you can use, oddly enough, I've used and I've suggested people to use either Indeed or LinkedIn, but to mainly filter out some of these larger tech firms, right? Smaller firms, medium firms tend to use Indeed a little bit more. That's not always, but like the tendency is to use Indeed a little bit more than LinkedIn. I would say some like basic tips: don't apply directly on Indeed or LinkedIn. Go to the company's website, apply. Don't just send in a stock resume. Make sure you're modifying the resume. Be clever about it when you apply to one of the nicest things about applying to a small firm or a medium firm is there's probably only about 100 to 500 people, which means you can go to LinkedIn, look at the company's page, filter the people in the company by HR, and send a message to those HR to say, hey, I just applied for this job, super excited, experiences armed forces, would love to contribute, right? It's so much more practical to do that for small and medium firms than it is to do with a large firm, because large firms literally have hundreds of recruiters, let alone other HR professionals and hiring managers. So that's a great workflow that I find to be very successful with even non-veterans, right? Is find jobs in Indeed, apply to the jobs on the company's website, not just through Indeed, not just through LinkedIn. But then if they're a small and medium-sized firm, go to LinkedIn, find the HR people, on the company page, and then reach out to them using, LinkedIn Premium Message if you're not connected to them.
Awesome. Last question, and I promise I'm going to give it over to other people. As I'm, people see my video blurred very often, but we're at the Smithsonian National Zoo right now with our kids. Homeschool field trip. What about like, because this is something that I've been hearing more of and taking a look at with being like the becoming the SME in your hometown kind of feel, where there's probably a lot of companies that don't have IT staff because they're not big enough to have an IT staff, that they're mostly you find them contracting with national companies, let alone local companies. But doing you said something about sunshine earlier, catching some sunshine and walking down the street and just looking up on your phone the businesses that you're going by. Do they even have a website, let alone any other? Because they don't have a website, they're probably not doing much on the online anyway.
Yep.
But doing a quick scan, and all of a sudden, you're walking past something and you say, oh, wow, they really struggle with this. I'm going to make an introduction. And it's something you never would have found on any job board online.
That's very true. I gotta tell you, I don't have a single entrepreneurial bone in my body, so that never even occurred to me. But that sounds incredibly smart, because you're actually right. Small businesses, for the most part, they either know a buddy, know a friend who kind of did a favor for them, or they're very cost constrained. It's very hard for them to go and get kind of a national agency or even a regional agency to go and do their IT, their website, their digital marketing, or even their HR ops. That's a great opportunity to go out and kind of just try a different avenue. I will tell you that when you are job hunting, it can feel like a very lonely marathon, right? Even though hundreds of people are doing the same thing, it's still you in front of your computer applying to jobs over and over and over again. That transition can be hard. That is a marathon. And so even just trying a different tactic like that, even if it isn't successful, and it sounds like it actually might be, candidly, but that's just my opinion. Even if it isn't successful, just the fact that you're trying something else, you're out there, you're just seeing the sun, you're outside your house, right, will make a huge difference. Huge.
Well,
difference.
and all the people that are in IT, you're not going to oversaturate an area because we all live everywhere across the country, and like, sure, there might be a couple people in a concentrated area, especially if you're in a bigger city, but like, uh, you know, your market is your own market to make of it. All right, I'm done now.
Hey, so I mean, why do you think the tech industry is great for veterans to go to, and why do you think the tech industry is something that we should be wary of?
I think that the tech industry is great for, well, again, there's largely speaking, there's like two or three flavors of tech. There's like absolute big tech, right? Massive conglomerates, Apple, Netflix, so on and so forth. Then you have mid-tier companies, Snowflake, Databricks, so on and so forth. And then you have startups. Those are three extremely different flavors of companies. They all have their pros and cons. I would say that tech in general, one benefit, generally pays really well. Whether the pay is direct pay or in stock, generally is going to pay you really well. Two, the larger the firm, the more likely they are to have a really strong veterans program. So that can be particularly good. As far as an entry. I know Salesforce has one that's particularly strong. They have a vet force team online. I think one of the challenges, big tech, is the speed at which they want to move. That presupposes you really understand how to work in that environment, and work both from a technical sense and then work also from a teaming and cultural sense. So if you aren't able to make that switch quickly, or you just don't want to make the switch for whatever reason, you'll struggle in tech, because there is a level of political correctness. You're just going to have to get with the program, right? Again, like I said, you can't admire the problem. You just deal with kind of the theater you're operating in. You have to really invest in learning all of the time. Even today, like 16, 17 years into my career, I still spend hours per week learning off the clock, on my own time, sometimes on the weekends, sometimes early in the morning. And so if you're not able to make that commitment because you have a lot of personal things going on, and that can happen, it's very normal, big tech can be really challenging. Startups in particular are not a 40-hour-a-week job. They are 60 to 80 hours, more like 70 hours, right? And so you really have to decide if you're ready for that kind of ride. It's really exciting. Don't get me wrong, it's super exciting. But I know for me, that's not my jam. I prefer larger firms. I prefer more stability. I prefer kind of the more 40 to 50 hour kind of work week with some hours on the side. So I'd say those are some of the big pros and cons, but also depends on kind of what tranche of tech you want to go to.
Got it. So, I mean, what's your best advice for anybody who kind of nervous about breaking into tech? Somebody who's been, 11 Bravo the whole time, and now they've gotten some certs and they're looking for that first gig.
Don't be afraid. Like literally nothing we do at tech is harder than camping out eating MREs for like 8 days straight. Like, it's just not a thing, right? Nothing we do in tech is harder than anything you've done in the Army. It doesn't matter what branch. The The only thing that will keep you from achieving your goals here is you holding yourself back. Realize that most people in tech don't know what the heck they're doing. They're all operating in the edge of their knowledge, trying to be better, right? And if you're already taking those first important steps, you're doing the search, you're learning, you're investing time, so on and so forth, you're already doing more than most people in corporate America are doing for their career. So move yourself forward and believe in yourself. You don't need someone else to validate your courage, your bravery, your grit, your passion, your seriousness about achieving your goal. Know that you have a community here that will help you get there, and just do that thing, right? And realize one big thing, and this is not my own lived experience, it's something that I heard from someone else, so take it for what it's worth. When you're in the army or like armed forces, I imagine in general, a lot of the time you're being told what to do. And that, you get told less and less maybe as you go up the ranks, but for the most part, you're getting told what to do. Your days are very structured. When you transition into civilian jobs, a lot of times that is not the case. And so you have to figure out the structure that will get you to your goal. So do not be afraid of breaking into tech. I'm just going to double down on one thing that I think Matthew said right before this, which is a lot of the job growth in tech isn't in the FANG space very directly. They're not necessarily in like software developers or product managers or something like that. A lot of the growth is actually happening in data centers. A lot of the growth is happening in networking. A lot of the growth might be happening in energy and the technology need for energy. A lot of it might be in red teaming. If you're in cyber, might be red teaming AI, right? And so try not to be overly attached to where the puck is today, and look at where the puck is going to be maybe 6 months, a year, or 2 years from now. So, power through it. If you feel like you need the motivation, talk to the community. But there's nothing special about people who've only done corporate America. Like in my experience, they have less grit than, folks that I met in the armed forces so far.
Yeah, lead the target.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a frame I can understand. Hey, Rex, it's been great having you here today. Thank you very much. Do you have any closing thoughts you'd like to share with the folks before you leave? Hang on, Cedric. Cedric's got a question before you go. Maybe I'll get it.
Good.
Hey, Rex. Good morning. Thank you for being with us here, all of us veterans, and sharing your experience and your transition. Congratulations on the successes you've had. I was interested in your thoughts on. I read an article recently. It was discussing how AI is taking over certain IT jobs.
Yep.
What is your sense? I guess like your perspective on that, and what jobs would be the best jobs to take to pretty much ensure that AI, you're safe from AI?
Such a meaty topic. I'll try to give you a short answer. AI is super valuable and effective in doing some level of knowledge work across the board, IT, non-IT. You're seeing a lot, when it comes to developers, designers, product managers, any jobs that require writing, so on and so forth. There's even systems in place that will like parse logs, take automated actions in systems, provision accounts, so on and so forth. What I tell you is that process of automation has been going on for a long time in IT and will continue to go on, right? What I would tell you is the best way to deal with the threat is by leaning into that threat, right? So are you aware of what IT is doing, right? Are you taking some courses? I don't even mean certifications necessarily, but are you taking some courses that understand how to work with LLMs? Are you familiar with are you familiar with the concept of evals? How do you test that an LLM or AI systems are secure and are working correctly? I will tell you that for the next year, 2 years, so on and so forth, probably in that range, the biggest question with AI, and I've done a lot of work in AI, has to do with, can you trust it 100% of the time, right? Like it's easy to trust AI to like summarize an email, but would you really trust it to parse out consistently in an automated fashion medical records? Would you trust it to turn off someone's account if they left the firm 100% of the time, no mistake? Or would you rather trust a deterministic workflow, right? A rules-based workflow. So I would say take some courses, maybe on Coursera or what so have you, in understanding AI and working with AI, because that will honestly, you will know the best as soon as you start using AI and learning about it, what jobs will be at risk and what jobs will not be at risk. But for the most part, jobs that require human interaction in whatever way, shape, or form, collaboration, are generally safer than ones that don't. And then the other thing to tell you is the strongest users of AI will always have a job, right? And because you're going to use AI to become that much more productive. As opposed to someone who doesn't know how to use AI, those would be the first people that might have struggle finding a job.
Awesome. Thank you, Rex, for your perspective. I did see that CompTIA has an AI certification, and I'm interested in chasing that down.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Okay. Matt, go ahead.
Hey, Rex. Thanks for your time and taking my question. Huge fan of Salesforce and AI tools and their integration. So I've been playing a lot with my AI tools on my Apple iPhone and just working on some personal projects.
Yeah.
Is there any like project that you would recommend to showcase the use of AI tools on a resume or a job interview? Or are there any like OJT or volunteer opportunities that maybe somebody could be involved with to gain a better understanding or experience?
Yeah, there's depending on the role, it's different, but I'd say that in the AI space, there's probably one tool and one skill that is highly beneficial, and going through it will teach you a lot. So one of them is on the trust side, right? So the skill is evaluations. It's often abbreviated as evals. Understanding how evals work is critical. But when you say, I want to test a system, that is basically evals in the world of AI. I can tell you it is a super underdeveloped skill. A lot of people don't know how to do it. It's a big reason why AI isn't even more endemic in our world. So that's the skill that is worth learning. A tool that you can use and projects that you can build. So the tool is N8N, November 8th, November. You can use it to create AI workflows. So you can make simple workflows or complex workflows. I forget who asked me the question about like volunteering for a small business, but a very simple workflow that you can build with N8N is it scans your emails, looks to see if somebody, nobody responded to this person from your company or from a small business, reaches out to them with another email with a Calendly link to schedule a meeting, right? AKA you're improving the leads for small businesses, right? Essentially giving small businesses a free secretary, if you will, or an executive assistant. N8N is really, really powerful for you to test things like, summarization, evals, memory, so on and so forth. So I'll say N8N is a great tool to start learning with, but try and solve someone's real problem. The problem in the space of summarization, voice, creation of text, creation of workflows. N8N is a great tool with which to create some really useful projects.
Awesome. That sounds great. Thank you.
Cool. Got like 1 minute for you. Any closing thoughts, sir?
No, I'd say just thank you all for your service. This country is great because people like you go out there and give up important and meaningful segments of your life to make it better. So thank you for your service. If you ever need any help, don't hesitate to reach out. But it's been great kind of hanging out with you all. And if you need anything, again, don't hesitate.
You're the man, Rex. Rex Serrao of Apple and the Army National Guard. Thank you very much for spending some time here with us, sir. I definitely picked up a few tidbits. Obviously everybody else certainly did too. So thank you very much. Keep killing it, brother.
All right.